back to the Accommodation Show. This is one of our first episodes for 2022. It's an exciting time. We've had such a rough 2021 and 2020. I'm excited for things to change and things to be a bit different. Folks, I'm excited to bring onto the show Thibault Masson, who is from Rental Scale-Up. He's been in the industry for quite a while. He's been a property owner in the likes of Paris, Bali, and the Caribbean. And he's also worked for Booking.com and has a huge amount of expertise in the vacation rental tech market. Welcome to the show, Thibault.
Hey, Bart. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me on the show. Great to be here.
Yeah, awesome. So you're joining us from Europe. It's quite early in the morning for you. It's evening for me. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and what you're up to in the accommodation space.
Sure. So I grew up in France. I'm really about anything vacation rental. We have this very strong passion for vacation rentals. I'm an owner, as you said, right? I have properties in Bali, Indonesia, as well in the Caribbean. I also had one at some point in Paris. I also worked at the headquarters of some tech companies like Booking.com, so helping lead big projects on a tech side for the vacation rental market as well. And the third thing, I have a website called Rental Scale-Up. And on Rental Scale-Up, what we do, we write about the industry. We have a free newsletter going out every Wednesday about the big trends, about what the big OTAs, what Airbnb, Booking.com are doing, and also representing new actors on the industry. So it's my big thing, vacation rentals.
And that's one of the reasons why I actually reached out to you and I connected with you. It's because of the content you were making and your commentary on, I think the first video I saw of yours was you commenting on the changes or the updates, the exciting updates that Airbnb had done. And you just go through and you dissect it from sort of an operator point of view, but also understanding technology. So you're kind of converging the two, which is quite similar to what we're doing as well. So I think we're brethren in that way. But I really enjoyed that video and I like that kind of content. What brought you towards starting to provide that kind of value and talk about these things?
Well, it's interesting you talk about this video, Bart, because not only was I think the content interesting, but also the setting nice, because I was talking from the Caribbean, from my house in St. Barths, that we rent out to guests. And that's actually what got me started, right? When I was in my 20s with my ex, we visited St. Barths for one day. We fell in love with the island, and we came back the year after, and we're a bit dreaming, and we said, oh, why don't we go villa hopping? And villa hopping basically means talking to a property manager and pretending that you want to buy something just to visit a few of these stunning properties. And we did that. And by the way, you should not do that. You should not waste property manager's time. Never do this. But anyway, so we did that, and the person was like, "What?
You were 20 years old.
25-ish, let's say, right?" But the guy was like, he's like, you know what? This is not a house you're visiting. It's a business. And we're like, what do you mean? It's like, well, this house is for sale. It was one of the smaller ones, clearly all the smaller ones, not the big ones. But it's for sale. And, if you go to a bank on the island, they would lend you money because it's an up-and-running villa. They have bookings for next year already, because in the Caribbean, quite often people come back year after year and they tend to book for the next year as soon as they leave. So they're like, well, if you go to the bank, you can show it's a revenue, it's got streams of revenues, it's a business, it's got streams of revenues for next year. You could get a loan. We're like, So that's how we did apply, we got the loan, and that's how we had a fancy villa in the Caribbean when we could not even afford to have our own apartment in Paris. That's how it got started. And I'm like, well, you know what, it's very interesting. And what we discovered through the years, and having a villa in Bali, for example, at some point, if you're going to have what I call direct bookings in this case, meaning not depending on property managers, you do have to know how OTAs work. You do have to know, how Airbnb works, how Booking.com works, how different they are. And that's how, and I started sharing tips, blogging about it, and I think people liked it. And that's how we're like, well, why don't we try to make it a bit more formal and have a news website about the topic. That's how it started.
That's awesome. So, how long has that blog been going for? Or how long ago did you start that blog where you were sharing your best tips and tricks?
So it started out, I think, in 1993, probably, and under the name of Rentalpreneurs, and we rebranded last year under Rental Scale-Up.
Right. Wow. Okay, so folks, if you are looking to meet someone that's got a huge amount of experience and that really has lived and breathed it through all the technological changes and advances out there, then this is the man that you want to get in touch with and that you want to get to know. And look, I've been, so we had chatted just before Christmas, and I was excited to have you on the show because I know that you've got all of this knowledge. And what I love the best is that you suggested the topic and you said, hey, let's do the top trends for 2022. Now, I recently did a video with my team on what we thought the top 10 trends were, and I don't know what your top trends are going to be. So I'm excited about today's topic. I really want to know what you think is going to be happening in 2022 and what we need to pay attention to. So yeah, I'd love you to get going. Like, let's get straight into it.
Sure. And I did watch your videos about the trends, and they're really good. And what I'm going to do now, I'm going to maybe go from hospitality trends and talk not about hospitality, but about the short-term rental market. It is a very interesting market because probably people listening or watching know that over the last 2 years, there's really been, let's say, a stronger preference for travelers to book a short-term rental over a hotel. First, well, a lot of hotels were closed in a lot of areas, or people didn't want to travel to New York City or could not travel to Melbourne, or for all kind of reasons, some hotels just shut down, or there was nobody going there. Meanwhile, if you look at the traditional vacation rental markets, by which I mean seaside, the mountain, rural areas, these areas were booming. If you look in the US, in 2021, it was the best year ever for short-term rentals, for vacation rentals, I'll go there. The best year ever, which is crazy. It was even better than the pre-pandemic. Again, there was this big preference for booking an entire house, not sharing something, the preference for, again, these destinations outside of cities, which does mean, and if you look at in the hospitality industry again, Marriott, for example, Marriott, which is this big hotel brand, I should say, Marriott really doubled down on their vacation rental brand. They have a brand called Homes and Villas, and over the last 2 years, they became one of the biggest contenders on the market. Now there are thousands of property managers who list their properties on Marriott Homes and Villas website because, again, a lot of hotels were closed or people didn't want to book a hotel room, so Marriott had to offer something to their travelers, and that's really when they doubled down on homes and villas. So what we're going to see this year, well, what's been interesting over the last 2 years, a lot of people have been introduced to short-term rentals. Believe it or not, but some people had never booked a vacation rental before, and now they've tried it, and some said, you know what, it's actually not for me, and then probably go back to hotels. But some others are like, it's not so bad. So hopefully this year, more hotels will reopen, cities will reopen as well. So we're going to see overall the demand going back there. So probably the share of short-term rentals, vacation rentals will go down, right? Because hotels will come back up. But there will still a lot of people who've been introduced to short-term rentals. And if you factor in things like remote working, where basically you can travel for a while and still work and bring the kids along, for example, it means that you still want probably to book a bigger place than have a hotel room, because obviously doing remote work in a hotel room with your partner, with your husband, wife, or with your kids is kind of tricky. So that's what we're going to see this year. Probably the share of short-term rentals will go down, but it does not mean that it will be bad, right? It's a proportion game. A second thing I would like to mention is that, as I said, that cities should be reopening. hopefully after the Omicron wave is gone, hopefully, so crossing fingers, it's kind of hard to predict things nowadays, but normally demand for cities will come back. And I'm talking about New York City again, or Melbourne, or Paris, right? What's been very, very interesting actually over the last 2 years, occupancy in cities was not, for short-term rentals, were not low. It sounds counterintuitive, but again, it's just, that's where really, when you're an industry professional, you have to look at the numbers and take a step back and say, what does it mean? What do you mean occupancy was actually even high in some places, like in Australia? How come there were no overseas travelers? Or, well, simply because a lot of supply disappeared. A lot of the supply disappeared. Like if you have a hotel, there's no way, I mean, it's kind of hard to convert a hotel into a residential home, right? But if you have, if you have a short-term rental in a city and you used to rent it out to travelers, you can at some point put it on the market to attract residents. That's what a lot of people did, again, in big cities in Europe, the US, and Australia. A lot of people did this. So it does mean actually that the supply went really down. If I'm looking at cities in Europe like Prague, for example, or Amsterdam, the supply in short-term rentals in the cities went down by 75% down. Not only because of less demand from international travelers, but also because there's more restrictions, more regulations taking place in these cities. So it does mean there were just fewer places where to stay, so demand was not too bad. So what's going to maybe happen again this year now that demand is going back to the cities, right? But some owners, property investors, may again start shifting back properties to the short-term rental market. It does not happen in one day. If you have tenants for a year, they have to stay for a year. But it does mean that supply may actually increase as demand will come back. So it may not mean that prices will go up in cities again, especially again in urban centers. Hotels will be reopening or have more demand. So competition will be pretty fierce in these areas for short-term rentals in cities. Because again, the more supply will come in, hotels will be there. So that's going to be interesting. So I think the conclusion here we have is that we're still going to see that non-urban areas doing really, really well. Urban demand will come back, but the average daily rates, the ADR for short-term cities, will probably not jump up the way it did in vacation rental markets.
Yeah, look, I agree with that one. I think it's going to take a bit of time. And I think that when we look at things, we always like to rush things. And over here, they call it the snap back, right? When everything snaps back to normal. And I don't think there will be a snap back because, as you said, it takes time for these things to move, to change, to get back to how they were. And the other thing that's clear as well is that even if demand starts to go up, you're just not going to have enough supply. There's not enough aeroplanes to bring people over. There's just not enough happening. It's not going to happen quick enough because actually the pandemic's been going on for so long. Like it wasn't 3 months, it wasn't 6 months, it's 2 years now. So I think that you're absolutely right on that point. It's going to take a while for it to get back to where it was, and therefore prices will be quite subdued for a little while.
Yeah. Another thing we could talk about is maybe to your point, things change, and so what we saw as well over the last 2 years is that what I call the market became a bit hyper-seasonal. So bear with me, may not mean much in English, but it may mean something. What I mean by hyper-seasonal, that if you look at the US or Europe, summer, which is, let's say, July, August, the peak, this is where the peak season was, in the summer, for most of the hospitality business. What we saw over the last 2 years, 2020, 2021, is that a lot of the bookings stayed, so people stayed in Q3, right? Basically what I mean is like in July, August. A lot of stays happened there, while the winter months were depressed. So in a way, the peak became even more acute, right? Everything was there. So that's what we saw last year as well. Also what we saw, by the way, we saw a longer summer. So it was like a peak more over, let's say, July, August, but as well into September and even October. So it's been very, very interesting. It's like you have this. It's the peak is more pronounced, but over 4 months, basically. It's very, very interesting. So will these things be happening this year? Well, and what we saw last year, right? What we saw last year, basically people waited, especially in, things have been so different from one area to another. In the US, as I said, it was the best year ever. Like month after month, short-term rental numbers were breaking records all over. I mean, for the industry, month after month. Meanwhile, in Europe, we had a lot of travel restrictions, no cross-border travel, way into, I think, May. So even June was soft. And then things just like cleared up in Europe, people could travel, and in June, July were crazy months. So probably what's going to happen this year again for these areas, we may see the same thing. Again, Omicron wave in the winter. It means there are not many stays happening right now, fewer than, let's say, pre-pandemic. And people wait, but what we see what's different from last year, that people have already started booking, definitely booked for the summer. It's very different from last year. I'm talking about Europe, for example. In Europe last year, people waited. Again, they didn't know what to expect with travel restrictions, and Europe was not aligned. Different countries into how can you travel from one country to another? What's going to happen? They solved that last summer. For example, in Europe, they managed to roll out the same app to have like your COVID pass or whatever that is, the same QR code across 27 countries, which is not a small feat. So these things had been rolled out last year and worked. So people were like, why the thing's going to work out this year too. So people have been booking really, really hard. So in a way, what we see now in Europe is what happened last year in the US. People learned from the summer and said, you know what, last summer, prices were high, there was not much supply. We have to book now because it's going to be crazy. So again, we may see this, but what's different with last year is people are really, really, really booking early. It's very, very impressive to see this. So it's still probably going to be also more seasonal, but with big difference with last year, bookings are even earlier. So that's another big trend we're seeing.
Yeah, especially for those places that are a bit more unique, that are in short supply.
Yeah, it's a good point. What's interesting, the first wave of COVID in 2020, if you look at the markets like the Hamptons, so let's say north of New York City, on a very nice posh destination, let's say. The Hamptons were the first place where affluent people fled to during the first wave of COVID when it hit New York City. But supply was low. Why was it so low? Because actually a lot of people own places there. And they went there and spent the time. So another thing that you don't have with the hotels, usually you don't have hotel investors and owners driving straight to their hotels and just sitting there in the hotels, and the hotels can't have any guests, right? But that's something you have sometimes with some short-term rental places. The owner is just there. Maybe they're remote working from there. They are staying there for the summer because they want to stay there for the season. So this owner-occupied thing meant again that supply went down, especially in beautiful locations or sought-after locations. So it's really, really impressive phenomenon we saw. And so to your point, you said that earlier, in unique places, like Airbnb, for example, has been promoting a lot unique stays, like unique places, like tree houses and yurts and these things. So to be clear, this is marketing, right? In the sense that most of what people are really booking on Airbnb and Booking.com is probably going to be apartments and condos. That's the reality of what people are really booking. But for marketing purposes, the great job that Airbnb has done to change perception of what Airbnb is about. Airbnb wanted to think that it was not just about urban apartments, but also about these tree houses and yurts and boats and private islands. That's why they really push it forward on the thing. So these unique places are important. But again, there's no way in 6 months you're going to build 50% more tree houses or put 50% more entire homes on the coast, right? It's just impossible. So there's really, to your point, a shortage. And it's not the snapback thing. It's kind of hard in some areas because you just can't build, or the owner's there, or so the available. That's important. The available supply has constraints.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's absolutely the point, is that when we're being marketed to, we're being marketed on an emotion, right? So we see this thing, we go, wow, we want to be there, we can create these memories and create these moments. But then the reality is, when we get there and we try to book, it just isn't available. Or if it is available, it costs you an arm and a leg so that you can actually stay at these particularly nice places and that sort of thing. So, and I think from what you're saying is people are a little bit more clued in that even though the marketing is, yes, we have this available, well, really it's not. It's really expensive, or you have to book really far in advance and make some plans around that experience, rather than leaving it too late. So I really like that point. I really like it. What's next on the list?
Conversion. So what's interesting is that compared to the hotels, short-term rentals tend to have, well, especially what I call vacation rental. When I say vacation rental, I mean non-urban supply. So this non-urban supply tends to have stricter cancellation policies, for example, way stricter than short-term rentals in cities, and of course, even stricter than what hotels have. Kind of makes sense, right? You have when you have one short-term rental, occupancy is at one given moment is either 0 or 100%, right? So a cancellation, it's not like a hotel where you have 50 bedrooms and what gets cancelled, you still have 49 other hotel bedrooms. So a lot of people, so for a lot of people as well, who are not investors but real, let's say, direct owners, a short-term rental, vacation rental is their own property with their own furniture. So they tend to care more, let's say, what may happen. So cancellation, they want to be, they want to protect their revenues more, and maybe they want damage deposits and all kind of things that makes conversion lower. I'm not even talking about, by the way, properties on request, right? Not even instant bookable. So it means conversion is lower on average for short-term rentals and hotel bedrooms. And yet what we see this year is really the arrival of these fintech products that are, let's say, bringing more flexibility in this very inflexible market. What do I mean here? Like, think about solutions like, book now, pay later, for example. You have actors like a firm, for example, or Klarna in e-commerce that are able to tell people, hey, you can book a vacation rental now, and you only pay, let's say, in a few months, or you pay in several installments. And Verbal, which is a brand that belongs to Expedia. Verbal is, for example, this brand that's is called Stays in Australia. It's Verbal in the US, or it's Abritel in France. Anyway, they have different names, but it's still Expedia Group behind. So they have this partnership with a firm, and you think about it, it makes sense, right? So if you're going to book for 1 week or even 2-3 weeks for a long stay to do remote working, it could reach really fast and pretty, in thousands of dollars. So these offers really enable you to start actually being able to book something, because maybe your credit card could not pay that amount in one go, or you just could not afford this. So it is very interesting. It's a way to bring more to increase conversion. Another way it's increasing conversion is when you look at actors like Hopper in the US. So Hopper is very interesting in the sense that it was the most downloaded travel app in 2021 in the US. It was ahead of Expedia, ahead of Airbnb, ahead of bookdir.com. Hopper was number one app that was downloaded. And what Hopper does, it's able to offer guarantees to people who want, for example, to cancel. For flights and for hotels, especially for flights. For example, for flights, they're able to tell you, even if your ticket, even the airline tells you it's not, you can't cancel it. If you buy, if you give us like $5-10, we're going to sell you a guarantee, and with this guarantee, you can book up until 24 hours before departure for your flights. Basically, it's a like sort of an insurance product. It's not insurance, but you see what I mean. It's like a lot of people are going to buy this option, makes money for the company, and the company people who do have to redeem this, the company can give them back their money, even if the product was not. So imagine bringing there, and Hopper is going to launch Hopper Homes in a few weeks from now. Vacation rentals. So imagine if they could bring this to the industry. It means even if the owner has a very strict cancellation policy, the OTA, in this case, so the online travel agency like Hopper, is able to bring flexibility by selling a kind of insurance that will make something inflexible flexible. It is pretty fantastic. It may mean the owner still keeps the money, but the guests get the money back. So it is such a change. Again, we're not just dreaming here. Hopper has been able to sell its technology not just for them, but a lot of actors in the industry, other OTAs, other meta search engines have actually bought Hopper's technology to do this. So sweeping change here.
I love that. I love those sorts of ideas, and I'm gonna be really honest with you. I feel out of place now. I hadn't heard of Hopper until today, so I'm hoping that some people in the audience are frantically having a look at what this app is and what it does. And funnily enough, this discussion around cancellations and around it's kind of like damage waivers as well that we could potentially sell to our guests and say, hey, if you pay me an extra $50, as long as the damage isn't intentional, I'll cover it. And you can actually make quite a lot of margin on offering these products that aren't insurance, they're just waivers and that sort of thing. So am I right in saying, so what you're thinking in terms of conversions is that there will be more conversions because these products will facilitate a wider market to purchase the short-term rentals and from a much wider range of options?
Yes, exactly. A wider market will be able to, let's say, afford it, for example, like paying this in several installments, or a wider market will not be, let's say, fewer people would be, like for the right word here, but some people are just not attracted by things that are completely inflexible, especially still now, right? The COVID's probably still, if COVID's gone, the memory of COVID will be there. So preference for something flexible will remain, will stay for a while. So anything that's bringing more flexibility is welcome. And that's tricky for you for property manager. If you're a property manager, how do you compete with the big OTAs who can afford to partner up with fintech companies and bring these solutions on their website? It is a tricky one, and you have to address it. It's not easy. It's not very easy to do. Again, companies like Affirm, for example, all these Klarna, they do partner with smaller websites. But again, it is yet another tech, yet another partnership that you have to master as a property manager. It is tricky.
Gotcha. Love it. Love it.
I will pick just like one more trend to make sure we keep it up. And one is environment, because I think it was one of the trends you had, Bart. You were talking about environment as well. And I feel like every year in January, we're like, this year, environment. It's happening. It's happening, right?
Sounds like the conferences, right? Yeah, this year they'll make some changes.
So, and I call this do look up, right? Do look up, right? In the sense that it's happening. And what I mean is happening, even if I'm French, so I can be cynical. You know, we are raised to be cynical with French people. So what I mean here is that if you look at big OTAs, like Booking.com, they have introduced filters on their website by which people can search and say, I want to find a place that has sustainable practices, for example. Why is it important? Because I can tell you, I've worked at Booking.com. Whenever Booking.com introduces a filter for something, it means that consumers want it. That's why there's so many crazy filters on Booking.com, by the way. If you go to the interface, it's just crazy. Anyway, but whenever you see a filter there on Booking.com, it's been heavily tested with data, heavily tested over and over again. So it means that if this filter there's demand for it, one, and two, it gets booking. Booking.com will never roll out something that is not creating bookings and money for them, ever. So it does mean you have this sustainable filter thing on their website. It means that they are asking properties, hotels, apartments, short-term rentals, right, to indicate whether they are taking any sustainable practices, whether they are doing anything for the environment. Because there's actual demand, and if owners or property owners, managers do fill in these fields on Booking.com, there's a high chance it will get a bit more bookings. I'm not saying 30% more bookings, but it's these kind of things where you have to have it. Again, it's a signal. Even if you're very cynical, if you just look at if the big OTAs are doing this, they're not here to save the planet, right? If they were here to save the planet, they would not be selling airplane tickets. But that's another question. If they're doing something, it means there's bookings here to be made, right? So it does mean that you don't have to do it, but let's say there's part of the audience on these websites that is looking for these kind of things. So if you want to capture this, you can do this. So I've stopped being cynical here, but it means it's been implemented on this website. So it's a signal in a way. What we've seen as well in the short-term rental industry is on the investment side. Just like in real estate, we've seen a lot of people starting to push for sustainable homes, way of building things, or even sustainable, meaning like having houses in areas that will not get flooded. This thing is happening as well for vacation rentals. Here I'm talking on the investment side, right? A lot of people buying a second home now, and right now I am in the Netherlands, as you know. 50% of Netherlands sits below the sea level. We are below the sea level. Right now I'm lucky I'm 2 meters above the sea level, so I feel very like on a mountain compared with the rest of the country. But a lot of people now looking at the secondary home are thinking, okay, if I buy this house now, and 10 years from now I want to sell it, I want to sell the house, will I be able to do that? Because in 2030, maybe people's mind, people will not want to buy anything in this area, some areas of Netherlands, because they know that by 2050, it will be underwater. So they will know it would be a bad investment for them. So people are always thinking that even if they don't feel threatened right now, they think that the value of a secondary home may decrease when it's time for them to resell in 10 years, because of what's going to happen in 10 to 15 years later. So it is a bit crazy, but it's what's really, really happening here. And so it does mean that in terms of investment, people are thinking about how can I have a building that is sustainable, but also in an area that's actually still going to be attractive, down the road in 20 to 30 years. And it is things that are happening now. We know that there's a lot of restrictions happening. Another one I will take, I have a house in the Caribbean, for example, and flying is not popular in lots of areas in Europe. People, are very, let's say, they're not becoming keen on flying because they think, you polluting kind of thing. So it does mean, again, in terms of investment, some people are thinking, you know what, if it's too far away, I'm not going to invest there because I can't go there. But most importantly, maybe travelers won't be able to reach these areas. So it is interesting because, again, the environment is shifting a lot of things. Even where money is invested. So that's the last trend I would quote. And again, these things are happening right now, so it's not just things. I think people are starting to factor this in the way they're investing, for example.
Yeah, and Thibault, I really feel that it's a generational thing. I think that if you look back 5 years ago, even buying a Tesla, it was kind of a fringe thing. It was almost like a computer back in the day where when computers came out, people were looking at them saying, oh, you'll never use that beyond, playing games or whatever. And now it's in our everyday life. And you can see a company like Tesla that's done such a great job of sort of just branding and marketing and making it cool and making it not only cool, but super functional to be more energy efficient. The cars drive better than combustion engines, so there's huge benefits to it as well. And as the market's learning about it, they're going, oh, this makes sense. Solar panels, like I was talking to a friend of mine that I used to work with, and we used to sell solar panels, and he's saying that the payback period can be 4 years. It's just insanity, right? And there's a lot, so that's what I'm saying, generationally it's changing, where I talk to some of my family, and they're like, oh, solar panels are expensive, and I can't even convince them myself that it's a worthwhile investment. But a younger generation, they'll just get it and go, okay, cool, yeah, I get it. And there's a lot of things that are going to make this huge difference, because I think that there's the bridge between it being better for the environment, but also from a being cool and being the right thing to do. I think that's completely changed.
Yeah, I agree with you. And the last one is regulations, right? You do feel there's a tipping point. Again, if you're in Europe, which is always very strong on regulations, you can feel all these regulations coming, right? For example, cars, all new cars being sold have got to be electric, I think, by 2030 or 35, or all these kind of regulations. It's happening. So people are like, so what did it mean in terms of like, where should be locating or secondary home? What does it mean? Or maybe, okay, we have a secondary home that's not too far from a high-speed train station. That may be the future because airports not so much. With high-speed train, that's what we want. So the regulations are happening, and so many of them on top of each other means it's really, really also changing how people are thinking. Right, to your point, solar panels or the things. So it is sort of a tipping point because at some point you have so many constraints and regulation that not just people want to do good, but also they kind of forced to being more minimally aware may change quite a few things in investment. It is again, I'm not saying it's going to happen like tomorrow morning, but it is being factored in by way more people.
Yeah, look, with the eco thing, there is one question that I have for you, and that is, obviously we're feeling more and more pressure because due to regulation, due to the environment changing, and one of the things that you said was this year, like every year we say the same thing, the environment's going to make a big impact and a big change. Do you feel that 2022 is going to be the year, or do you think it's just going to be something that's incrementally getting more important and it's going to be 2022, 2023 and just so on and so forth, or do you think we're at we've hit the peak?
What I mean here, it's a great question. What I mean here is that I gave the example of filters showing up on the OTAs or people starting to factor this in investment. These are signs it has real world impact, right? So it will increase from there, right? That's what I mean. It's like, so some people who are, again, thinking early are like, well, for example, we are, with my partner, we're looking at having a property somewhere, and we're like, okay, this property 10 years from now, how do we assure, we like 3 different little places people can rent out on a piece of land. Okay, how are we sure in 10 years from now we have water? We're really thinking about this, right? Because you're like, okay, now we have to be sustainable, and also we'll make sure 10 years from now we can have our own, it's energy efficient because if 10 years from now we want to sell it, we want to make sure people who buy it don't think, oh, Jesus, it's not energy efficient or there's water shortage, because it could have impact on the value. That's what I mean. It's like this. We see this happening in the way people think about that. Again, it may not be the same case if you're buying for 2 years. Well, it's okay. But if you are really thinking about investment, these are questions you're starting asking yourself.
Yeah, that's where I was feeling I was going with the investment side of it, and I've talked to many property managers that put that as part of their KPIs when they are investing, and just going, okay, where does it rank on sustainability, especially when they're going out to tender to larger organizations where they actually have these measures that have to be put into place to be able to win the tenders. So it's absolutely right, and I agree with that one being more important than ever in 2022, and I'm glad that we agree on that one. Now, Thibault, thank you so much for joining us, for spending your morning with us and sharing some of your thoughts for the coming year. We're going to have to get you to come back next year so that you can we can have a look back and see how we went. Now, thanks a lot for your time. Now, is there anything the community can do for you in return?
Well, something else I can do for the community is so as I said, we do have this free newsletter that's we ship every Wednesday. So if you go to rentalscaleup.com/newsletter, you can just subscribe for it. It's completely free, and we give you the big trends, and we also have sometimes every week we have job opportunities actually as well, because I really care about helping people in industry. It's an industry that's booming, so there's always a lot of job opportunities. So if I can help your community being together, if they do have a job posting, for example, just reach out to me. I'm super happy to share it with my own community.
Beautiful. Great. So, folks, do find Thibault on rentalscaleup.com. Find him on LinkedIn as well. I'm sure that he's on all the different social platforms. We will put all the links to find everything that you need in the show notes. I do know as well as that he's been kind enough to reach out with a special offer to join his community, and that will be in the show notes as well, where you get a bit of a discount. I appreciate that for you doing that for us. That's really great. And I look forward to talking to you again throughout the year, and have a fantastic 2020.
Thank you, Bart. Thank you everyone for listening. Have a great day.
Thank you so much. Cheers. You too.